Hello, everyone, at Inside today's Locked On Canadiens. Samuel Montembeault gets extended. Alex Newhook hits long-term injured reserve, more than likely, and another disastrous weekend for the Canadiens. All that and more inside today's show.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 965 of Locked On Canadiens. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. We are your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you get your daily podcast, Google, Apple, Spotify, or if you are watching us on youtube.com, we are in video format as well. So busy week. Normally, this is the episode that is going out on Monday. And normally today, Laura and myself would sit down. We'd do 3 up and 3 down and kind of recap the weekend. However, because we recorded a special episode ahead of the game on Thursday last week with Jerome Berube of Hockey Prospect, that we have a lot of news to actually catch up on from that we're doing in this. 3 up and 3 down will be back after the Canadiens take on the Seattle Kraken Monday night at 7:30. So that will be back in later this week, barring anything else nuts happening right now. And I've been talking for a bit here, and I haven't even introduced my co-host. Laura, it is, I don't want to say an unfortunate weekend because there were some good things for the Canadiens this weekend, but it was not great as well. How are we feeling going into another busy week here for Montreal?
Honestly, I think for me, I'm trying to focus on the positives because I feel like a lot of the fan base is just getting down in the minutia of this person did this play wrong, or they should be doing this better and all of that, which is all true, and we are going to talk about it. It wasn't a great weekend for the Habs, but one of their question marks was answered, and I think that is not insignificant, and that to me is like, it's a huge deal. And also, just real quick, don't forget, go catch that Friday mailbag with Jerome. I called him Jerome again. Jerome Berube, because it was really informative. There's a ton of future draft stuff coming up. We talked a little bit about current Habs prospects, but definitely check it out. Anyway, I thought the biggest thing for the Canadiens is there's news, and it's good news.
Yes. And like you said, is that they did get answers, in one of their things looming over their heads going into this. On Friday, it was Samuel Montembeault getting extended for 3 years at $3.15 million a season. It's the right choice. And I think based on now we're 23, 24 games into the season at this point, it's the right move, because he has been your starting goaltender. He has been your best goaltender this year. I just wanted to take a look at what his numbers are here.
And in the meantime, I will say, we did an episode we were talking about the Columbus Blue Jackets have interest in Montembeault. Like, they have interest in all the Canadiens goaltenders, but specifically Montembeault. Like, that's the guy they wanted. And a lot of our listeners were just like, just don't trade Monty. It's a no-brainer. Don't trade him. Don't trade him. Don't trade him. And it's because he's the one that's proven to be the most steady in goal, right? So I do think that the Canadiens made the right choice, but at the same time, you look at that, it says 3 years, right? So do the Canadiens think that they're actually going to start contending in 3 years? So they're going to ask that question 3 years from now? Do they think it's 2 years away? Like, you have to look at that timeline. And to me, it just makes it clear that the Canadiens are taking a long time. Like, they're taking their time. It's going to be a while. We're going to have to be patient, as much as I hate the sound of that.
Yeah, and like this year, Samuel Montembeault is 5-3-1, 2.73 goals against, 910 save percentage. That's behind this defense. That's about as good as you can hope for in this, and that it's a deserved extension. And there are people like that, and I normally wouldn't be like, delve into this, but there are people like, oh, this team is directionless. What are they doing? This isn't good for the tank. If Montembeault is playing well and they're still losing games, how is that not a good thing here? Samuel Montembeault is not meant to be the goaltender who gets them over the hump there. He is supposed to be the stabilizing presence for this team in net here, in that he is going to be the one who bridges that gap while they wait for Jacob Fowler, Quentin Miller. If it ends up being Jakob Dobish, which it doesn't look like it's going to be at this current point, what's the downside to signing a guy who seems to like playing here, is well liked by his teammates, and puts up decent numbers so it's one less thing they have to worry about in this rebuilding here? The people that it's like, it's directionless, it's bad, they should just play Primo and lose as many games. You have to win games again at some point, and we have no proof that Caden Primo can do that right now. My thought is this throws all the gas on the fire for the other two goaltenders, and I do not expect it to be Caden Primo who is traded still. I really do think it's going to be Jake Allen that is going the other way. Apparently, the Oilers are expecting to bring Jack Campbell back up, which just seems like a bad idea across the board. I think we're going to be getting to the climax, the crest, the peak of this issue here in short order. With Montembeault extended, I can't see them trading him. Because if they do, it feels like it'd be a really bad idea and it sends the wrong message. It's like, hey, you played well. We rewarded you with a new contract. Okay, out the door. That is things that the previous regime did. Look at PK Subban. He got his contract and then was promptly traded before it kicked in because they didn't want to pay him. I'm happy Montembeault got extended. It's one less thing to worry about now. Because if they went into the trade deadline end of the season and Montembeault hadn't been extended yet, we're going, okay, now what? And they can't run three goaltenders forever. They have to open up the roster space for other players there. We're getting to the end of the line here, I think, with the three goalie rotation. They've seen enough probably from everybody else. We will probably see each of these goalies play one more game this week. I think by Christmas, one of these players is going to be traded. If not, I'm either wondering if the market is colder than we expected, or if some of the Canadiens goalies have just played themselves out of, I don't know, being traded at this point.
Yeah, contention for a trade, I guess. I think teams will be more interested in Allen than Primo if they're looking at the NHL record. Obviously, some teams might want to take a chance on Primo. I mean, when Samuel Montembeault came over here, he wasn't that old, right? Like he's now, we said 28, 27, 28.
He's 27 right
He's
now, I
27. He
believe.
got picked up on waivers, and he ended up doing the most with that chance, including having a wrist injury, right? Playing through an injury. So it's not the end of the line for Primo. Like maybe someone's going to want to take a chance on him. I do think, though, they're probably waiting for one of those players to be waived to grab them without having to give up anything in exchange.
And that's exactly it. I still don't know what this deal is going to look like. Unfortunately, Jake Allen has kind of lowered his own value. Like playing, and we will touch on this in the last segment a little bit here too, but Allen started the game against Detroit terribly. The team in front of him didn't help at all either, which is also kind of an issue. And then locked it down as best he could until overtime. And then they lost because, of course, they did. And he's still an improvement on anything the Oilers have, but that value went from you're going to get whatever you ask for to the package is slowly kind of shrinking to you're likely taking Jack Campbell, a first round pick, and maybe a prospect versus you're definitely getting all of these things in one box there. I'm very curious how this plays out. It is Sunday. They play Monday night and then they're off until Thursday. So if I was a betting man, and I'm not always a betting man, sometime between the end of the Seattle Kraken game on Monday and the game on Thursday, something I think is going to give in that space there. If I had to use any of I do not have any inside sources, but there's a long enough gap that if they have to bring in new players, move bodies around, rest up other people who are injured, that they can do it in that time frame there. The biggest thing out of all this is they have a stable 1A goaltender in Samuel Montembeault for at least the next 3 years. that gives them time to develop some of their prospects as they get this rebuild into the next steps. However, the news from the end of last week wasn't all good for the Montreal Canadiens because the injury bug continues to hang around. We have Alex Newhook injury news, and we will get into all of that coming up in our next segment. But first, today's show is brought to you by Sleeper, and a new NHL season always brings all sorts of possibilities. We're hoping Cole Caulfield can hit 50 goals on the season. They're not going to be competing for the Stanley Cup anytime soon, but not far off in there. And if you want to win big playing daily fantasy hockey, you can use Sleeper, the official daily fantasy hockey app of the Locked On NHL Network. And it's our number one choice for fantasy sports and especially fantasy hockey because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey picks here. All you have to do, pick a few players. Do you think Connor McDavid's continue to stay hot? Do you think Austin Matthews is going to snap out of his slump? Is Sidney Crosby going to continue to be a freak? Pick any of these players, and if they will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus or more in a given game, and to win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. That's right, Habs fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, so start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Just use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and of course, we are your daily podcast for all things Montreal Canadiens and around the NHL, of course. And if you want a 24/7 stream of all constant sports news from local experts like Laura and myself, subscribe to the Locked On Sports Today channel on YouTube, where they have a 24/7 stream of all the Locked On content you can handle from all of our daily shows and our national shows as well. That's Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, of course. Now, we got good news because, that's great. We love to see a Samuel Montembeault extension. We love to see snack time be extended in Montreal. And then they immediately followed it up by losing badly to the Florida Panthers in what was, as I said on our show, it was going to be dumb. It was a dirty game because that's who the Florida Panthers are, sneakily, I guess, for the most part. Alex Newhook took a bad hit in the first period, wasn't called a penalty despite getting sticked in the skate into the boards, twisted his knee weirdly, came back into the game later, got pitchforked into the side of the net where his ankle did the same thing Josh Anderson's did last year, where it went into the net did not move, and his ankle bent. And the news out of all of this is high ankle sprain. Alex Newhook is going to miss 10 to 12 weeks, so anywhere from 3 to 4 months. And that's basically the rest of the year. If we're counting December as this, he could be back in March. And that gives us, a month maybe of hockey left if everything goes well, assuming the rehab goes well and his ankle feels good enough. In response, the Canadiens called up Mitchell Stevens from the Laval Rocket. He is one of their top 6 centers in the AHL. And I know people are going to look at this and be like, we want Joshua Wild, we want this. I'm not opposed to them calling up a guy just to fill a 4th line spot and shift pieces like they did against Detroit a little bit there. And we will touch on the lineup decisions in our last segment here. But Laura, Newhook seemed to be finding new life, was on a pretty good goal scoring streak, 7 goals on the season, was definitely finding his footing. And now the Canadiens are without another key young piece in this lineup. They already lost Kirby Dach for the year. They now have Newhook, who's going to be out for most of the rest of this season here. Jack Guy's on IR. Jordan Harris is on IR. It's just so frustrating that, and it's not like this is a medical staff fault. We all saw what happened to him. Like, what do you even say at this point? And it really changes the complexity of the Canadiens lineup, because what it means is more potential Josh Anderson in the top 6, which
isn't going well right now.
It doesn't work at all. Like, at all, it does not work. So I guess my question is, like, what do you even do now? Do you ask for like an NHL forward in a goaltender trade? Do you ask for, or do you keep going for prospects and trying to roll with what you have now and build that treasure chest of prospects up again in the AHL?
I think you work on the prospects, to be honest, and maybe you do a rotation basis. Yes, people have to be deserving to get that call up. You don't want to break up the chemistry in Laval, though. You want to make sure that that team is functioning. Excuse me. I seem to have lost my voice with like how frustrated I am with these injuries. But in general, like what you want is you want to give people a chance to see if they're going to fit that mold as well, right? So like everybody's talking about Joshua Waugh. Like let's talk about like somebody who's going to fill out your middle six too. Like look at those prospects as well and see how far they can go. So like give people a chance, but maybe do it on a rotational basis. Yes, based on whether or not they deserve it, based on their performance. Yes, but don't just bring somebody up and just leave them there for the rest of the year or until Newhook comes back. Give people opportunities, a few games at a time.
And I think that's kind of it, is because the Rocket are battling through their own injuries right now. They just got Emil Heineman back. Lias Anderson is still out for a while. Uh, I'm missing another name here. Philippe Maillet just came back. Gabriel Bork just came back. They're still missing Sean Farrell indefinitely. Lias Anderson's out for another month, I believe, at this point. And here's the point where I'd be like, wow, it'd be great to have Philip Machar, but I can't argue that sending him back to the OHL this year was a good idea. It's just they laid all these good plans for everything. Defensive players, they loaded up on that. Yeah, forwards, they loaded up on that. And now both the Rocket and the Lions in the ECHL are down to bare scraps because they keep losing to injury. It's not like they're being recalled and they're going to. The only. It's not like these players are going to come back down from one of the other teams. There is that they're just out. Farrell's out indefinitely. There's nothing you can do about that. And now Newhook, it's not like, oh, he's going to miss a game or two. It's fine. He's going to miss 3 to 4 months with likely the worst case scenario. Because as I found out, probably better to actually break the ankle and have it be strengthened and heal up properly because ligaments take longer to heal. Something I should have probably remembered from going to college for this sort of thing. And it's like, what do you do? And the hardest part is this is compounding with a coach who is making head scratching decisions across the board here. And we are going to talk about that at the end of the show here, but it's all compounding to make it to be a really, really frustrating kind of season here, is that we see the good parts. Juraj Slavkovsky playing well, Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield working well together, some flashes from some other players. Newhook was one of them. And then it unbalances itself fully here. And they're not last in the division. They're sixth in the division. Ottawa and Buffalo are both below them in the standings, which is hilarious considering how the season should have gone. And both those teams are pushing for playoff berths. But this team isn't where it needs to be at. And losing these players, it continues to wreck their best laid plans. And I'm curious how Kent Hughes, Martin St. Louis, and everybody are going to pivot here, because again, this is not a short-term injury where, oh, he's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, fine. Call somebody up, run through the new year, be fine. You have long-term planning you need to fix now. You don't have a second line center. You're missing a top 6, middle 6 winger now, and you have another option who hasn't scored a goal this year. He's being outscored by a goaltender, and that's a problem. I don't want to sound like I'm, disaster planning this or anything, but they're getting put in a tough spot and they got to do something here. I'm just not sure what that answer is right now.
I honestly think it is to give people opportunities because like at this point in time, like and you could also use this to kind of see who you can part with at the trade deadline, right? Like maybe the Canadians want to be sellers at the trade deadline. I mean, not maybe, we know that that's what they want to do. They want to be sellers at the trade deadline. They can like stockpile their picks and prospects cupboard. And so you see what's working and what's not, and you see maybe a player that doesn't fit but isn't a bad player, and which prospects you can part with, right? Like you can just kind of take a look and see um, what is available to you. But it is quite unfortunate. Like I think it's unfortunate for Alex Newhook, right? Like he came better than advertised, or better than Habs expected, Habs fans expected, right? Like Kent Hughes probably advertised it accurately. and then there was the unfortunate thing of the player that he had built the most chemistry with being out for the rest of the season. So now that he's out too, like it doesn't give him that opportunity to take the steps that we want to take for him to become part of this team's future. But in terms of what to do, like honestly, just see what you've got and see what fat you can cut.
My biggest thing with this is that this should be an opportunity for a player like Jesse Alonen, Raphael Harvey-Pinard when they come back from injury. They don't have to go out and spend on somebody if they don't want to. You can add a piece inside here and give it a shot because this should be an evaluation period now. What do we have? Can this work? And the other night, Jesse Alonen played under 7 minutes at 5-on-5 ice time. And it's like he was playing well. And this is actually perfect because this is going to pivot into our final segment here is that it was a bad weekend for the Canadiens. They went 1-1 on the week, which we thought might be good. It's the way that they got there that is the problem. And we're going to get into what happened, and that's all coming up next. But first, when you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish that you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, then you need Indeed. And if you hate waiting, US data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job on Indeed. I went through all this when I was looking for a new job, and Indeed made everything so easy to find people who matched with my strengths and that I could provide the best opportunity for them. And with Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. So Indeed knows that you are growing your own business and you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. One more time, that is Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everybody. And if you need to hire, you need Indeed. So, as we wrapped up last segment, the Canadiens went 1-1 on the week last week. Beat Columbus, lost to the Panthers, lost in overtime to the Detroit Red Wings, which, okay, not terrible. The game against Detroit was one they probably should have lost, could have lost very quickly. They had a disastrous start to that where Justin Barron put together one of the most shocking couple minutes of play I had ever seen from a defenseman, and that's saying a lot. They came back, forced overtime with a great play by Josh Anderson. I know we've given him a lot of stick this year, but he passed up a chance on goal to set up Gustav Lindstrom's game-tying goal. The biggest problem I have with a game like this is that they are down scoring forwards, counting Josh Anderson in there because he isn't scoring goals, unfortunately, there. So, do they promote some of those younger guys playing well? Do they promote guys who've been having good games in recent weeks? They put Yoel Armia on the top line for the third period. He had a shorthanded goal in the game, which is great, but we've done this before, and it doesn't work. The best three players in terms of possession and expected goals going into the third period in the game against Detroit were Mitchell Stevens. Okay, you're keeping him as your fourth line center. Makes sense, understandable. Jonathan Kovacevic, defenseman, can't be a forward. And then Jesse Alonen, who played under 7 minutes at the point that I had checked there. It's a problem that you aren't going to give them the opportunity. You're going to give it to Yoel Armia, which, God love the guy, is what he is at this point. We've seen Jesse Alonen be a high skill player with finesse. He's been on the penalty kill. He's done a lot of good things this year. And then he sits on the bench. Yes, play him more. I'm not saying it needs to be a permanent addition to the top six there. But what are we doing?
More minutes than he does now.
Yeah, it's like, what are we doing with Tanner Pearson, Josh Anderson, and Christian Dvorak? It doesn't work. What are we doing with Monahan on the top line is fine in and of itself if they're trying to get him going. I just have so many questions about why they won't do the one thing that probably needs to be done here. Because I'm going to go look at the Canadiens on ice time here at 5-on-5. And Jesse Alonen played 10 total minutes at 5-on-5, 9:57. Somehow Gallagher, Pearson, and Struble were less. In all situations, Gallagher ended up playing over 13 minutes. Yessi alone played 11:49.
That's not enough for Yessi Alonen. And this is the thing, like you said, Scott, you're not saying keep him on the top line permanently, and give him like the most prime position and spot. It's really just putting him in more situations where his skill could come in useful. Is he going to screw up? Maybe, but he hasn't proven himself to be an inconsistent and volatile player in the last couple of years here. He's done everything that's been asked of him, and I think they need to ask him for more. Like give him more, like put him on the ice for longer, give him more situations. And I don't think the Canadians are going to regret it. Like, what do you have to lose at this point? Like, you lose so many games anyway.
And that's exactly it. As I'm looking at the numbers here, Mitchell Stevens and like Yoel Armia played well, which is great, but it's like we
His
know,
ceiling is lower than Ilonen's ceiling.
yes, we know what Yoel Armia is, and they took Slavkovsky out of a situation where he was playing well. It's like I get it. Newhook is out. Just put him with Caulfield and Suzuki then, because Slavkovsky and Caulfield were working well on a line with Christian Dvorak. Why are you taking him out of that situation? And someone put it as they are trusting him to be a stabilizing piece on another line. And I go, that's not development right now, though. He's still getting his game figured out. And if you're going, okay, you were riding this bike here on this nice level street with your training wheels. Okay, you're still doing it. We're going to take some of the training wheels off and move you away from Nick Suzuki. Okay, you're doing well. We're going to put you down the Swiss Alps on this bike. By the way, your brakes don't work. It's icy and you're being chased by a bear. It doesn't make sense. And I know that Martin St. Louis is also still figuring things out as a coach, but the lineup decisions continue to be a thing that do not make sense in my head right now. Good players it can be seen that they're being rewarded in that you can guide this line that is struggling. But at the same time, then they start to struggle because they cannot do what you're asking of them. And a good coach needs to realize, okay, I can't do this. It doesn't make sense right now. And the biggest thing is, if this was based on meritocracy and ice time was divided up by who was playing well, Josh Anderson should be sitting in the press box for a game or two because every line he is on gets just dragged down to the depths. And you can't ask a guy like Slavkovsky or Tanner Pearson or Christian Dvorak to fix that right now. It's just not a thing that is going to happen. And yeah, 1-1-1 is great. They played a decent game against Columbus, got a deserved win there, got smoked by the Panthers, which probably should have been expected. Back-to-back, Panthers on rest, better team, etc. And then the Detroit game where they just came out flat, battled back, and then lost in overtime where they never touched the puck. It's frustrating because we know they're capable of more, and the lineup decisions don't seem to work. They throw it in the blender. Things kind of get going later in the game. Not a recipe for long-term success.
Absolutely not. And that's why we're saying, like, make some changes, right? Like, like this season's a quote unquote wash. Just experiment and have fun. Do different things, see how it works out.
And that's exactly it, is that I don't think we're asking for much. Like, we're asking, hey, can you put this prospect in the top 6? Because here's the thing is, people want Joshua Waugh here. They're looking to fill fourth line spots and shuffle their current lineup. Do you want to put Joshua Waugh on the fourth line? No, because then you're going to be upset that Joshua Waugh is on the fourth line. Understandably so. That doesn't factor in his current struggles with the Rocket and the Rocket's current struggles as well, mind you. But that's not the whole point of this episode right now. I actually meant to look up the schedule here real quick. So the Habs have Seattle on Monday. The Kings come to town on Thursday. Sabres on Saturday, Predators on Sunday. It's a busy week there, and it's another week where there are 3 games for the taking right now. There's like the Kraken have struggled overall. The Sabres have struggled mightily, and obviously LA is, very, very good. But I look at this, the Predators are sitting around the same points as the Canadiens. It's a winnable game. Kraken are sitting around the same points as the Canadiens. Winnable game. The Sabres game is winnable. And if you write off LA, you could put together a 3-1 week. I would settle for 2-2 if they can get there in the proper way. If you play well but lose, 3-2, 4-2, but you played really well. You outshot them. Your goaltending was good. They just kind of had the bounces go their way. Fine. If you play a game where you don't show up at all and then you lose, then it's a problem a little bit there. So I'd like to see the Canadiens maybe come out of this week with a winning record. I don't think they're going to, just because that game against LA kind of worries me a little bit, because the last time they played, LA ran them over with a freight truck. So we'll see what happens in that one. Like I said off the top of the show, if you're missing 3 Up and 3 Down, it will be back tomorrow after the Kraken game.
I wonder who's going to be on it.
Oh, yeah. It could change very quickly depending on how that Seattle Kraken game goes, if we're being quite honest with everybody. So we will have the game recap. We will have 3 Up and 3 Down. Then we'll get into the week there where we both kind of expect something is going to happen at some point. Until that time, you can follow us on Twitter at LO_Canadians, LockedOnCanadians@gmail.com. If you have any things you want to send to us, follow Laura at The Active Stick, myself at Scott Matlow. We are available wherever you get your daily podcast, on Google, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube.com. And when you are done listening to us, go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first 24/7 channel with all of the Locked On content from all of our local experts and national shows. That is Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.